Okay. Um, First of all, I posted this up on Slack, I think yesterday, announcing this event on April 11th, so a couple weeks away. It's going to be over in the pharmacy building. It's a kind of an AI, I don't know, AI thing for uh, how AI embeds into other disciplines other than computer science. And it actually got me thinking. I'm going to spend a couple minutes talking about this today, because it is related to what we do in here today. But I'm also interested in what the current mindset of a computer science student is. Like when we say uh, AI today, what are we talking about? So when I say like, what do you think about AI? What pops into your head? What do you think AI is? Go ahead. Okay. So ChatGPT, Grok, um, those things. Okay. What else? And well, let's actually pause there for a second. What do those models do? Go ahead.
They're predictive. They use like statistics to pretty much figure out what they think will come next based on like training data.
Okay. Well, so what problem are they solving? So a tool like ChatGPT, I mean, he's right. I mean, ChatGPT, it's not, I mean, we say artificial intelligence. I mean, we can sit there and dive down the rabbit hole where at what point does intelligence become, I don't know, actual intelligence versus just a predictive nature or something, but we're at least trying to mimic a human-like intelligence. Okay. And what problem is a tool like ChatGPT, specifically ChatGPT? What problem is that tool solving? Right.
Kind of just like it's a problem to answer questions that's given by a chat, be it like what what's the date today? Anywhere from that to like we're gonna even do things that are just requests specifically to requests as well.
Okay. I think that's true. So we can think of these as like generalized intelligence, not necessarily jack of all trades. If something, the way I articulated at a presentation the other day, it's like having a college graduate in your pocket, but with majors in every single discipline, right? So tools like ChatGPT have been trained on millions and millions and millions of different data points from all sorts of different domains. And I know something that Dr. Locklear points out in his AI classes is that he seems to emphasize in the idea that oh well, sometimes it lies to you, it gives you bad information or something like that. It doesn't do that nearly as much as it used to. Um, when does it lie? And this kind of gets back to the whole model of what is at what point is artificial intelligence mimicking real intelligence shockingly well? For any of us, when somebody asks you a question, you're in a conversation, you don't quite know the answer. Sometimes we make it up, right? Sometimes we spin it, we put our own little angle on it. So that seems very human to me, and ChatGPT does that. But so getting back to the actual original question was, what's the problem that a tool like ChatGPT is solving? It's solving general intelligence. And this is kind of, I think, the problem with the buzzword AI today is, it started off with this idea of a chat bot, right? And ChatGPT, the reason it's called ChatGPT is the GPT aspect of it is the model. Chat is kind of a descriptive. This is something for me to chat with. And it's been trained on such high quality data, and it's got and it's improved so much. And the hardware that ChatGPT has in that OpenAI, the makers of ChatGPT have, is ridiculous. If you saw what it takes to train something like that, you could not do it on our normal computers. Um, okay, so that's one thing AI means. What else does AI mean? Is that it? Is the entire world of AI ChatGPT or its direct competitors? Go ahead. Okay, so what else can it mean?
Any AI games that comes to our
Okay, well, so enemy AI in video games. So that's kind of what we're dealing with here a little bit, even though we don't have enemies doing that much AI. If we go back to earlier video games, AI was just a series of if statements, right? Maybe your game object, the monster game object knew where the player game object was, and each frame it just started heading there, right? And if there was tunnels and stuff in between, it had to path through those tunnels to figure out where does its next little step. It's predicting its next step. Um, is that really intelligence, or is that just a math problem where it's like, playing a game of tag, something like that? In fact, I think we saw that in our rollerball example, right? Where we had the guy in there started to, and he had him chasing him around and stuff like that. Um, okay, so that is something historically we would have called like AI in video games. We just used that term blanketly, which effectively said, oh, the enemies kind of act smarter than they would otherwise. And we might even compare different video games by saying, well, the AI in this game, the enemies act more naturally intelligent than maybe some other games where you can kind of figure out how the AI works, and then you could use it against them, get them trapped in a corner or something like that. Okay. So what else? Good.
So in the finance field, I mean, you could have like an AI that uses, all these different types of data points to figure out, what's the next like biggest like investment you should do, or what's the next biggest trend, or what's going to go up, what's going to go down.
Mhm.
I mean, certainly for those people, having that, trying to predict the future is definitely difficult. But if you have something like, your AI model that only focuses on, stocks or, just
Well, why not just use ChatGPT for making your stock picks?
Well,
What's
again,
the problem with that?
it's more, as you said, it's like general, you could have like something that's more like specific, I guess,
Mhm. Yeah, so ChatGPT probably could give us decent advice for stock picks and stuff that relative to what's already in our head. It gives us that starting point, right? But if you really want to dive into the world of stock trading and think, we don't know what we don't know. Now you take a model, so we call this thing a model. Like ChatGPT is a trained model. We can take another model that might not know how to do anything except stock stuff. It started off as this untrained brain with minimal capabilities, and it was just fed in things dealing with stock picks or financial stuff or whatever. Pick the domain. Instead of the general domain where it solves all problems, it's solving a very specific domain with the idea that at least for things dealing with that, it's going to be better than ChatGPT. ChatGPT is going to beat the pants off it and every other thing because it doesn't know about any of those things. Um, but it's going to be better than that. So now you start getting into what AI actually means in industry. We have these various tools, and even among ChatGPT, I think there's a whole layer of people that view it as kind of just like enhanced Google, something like that, where it really is quite a bit more than that if you get into using it. Um, Now, does AI let us do anything that we couldn't do before from a computer science programming perspective? Go ahead. Well, that's not a computer science thing, but you're right. I mean that is pretty impressive, and it always is a struggle when you have it, give you some information, you have it write something for you, and you look at it and you say, I agree with all that, and that's better than I would have ever done. Go ahead.
It's like it's like looking at something like the chess box. Like humans can play chess and they can play it very well, but an AI that's been specifically trained can beat even the best human every single time. Because it's so specialized directly to that. And
Mhm.
so in that same way, there isn't so much something that AI can do that we can't do. It comes down to the fact that AI can do it better.
Okay. So I like the chess example because I think the chess example is a good example of where AI really actually doesn't do it better. Well, put a pin on that word for a second, but chess is something, I mean, so the best chess players in the world, they can look ahead 10 moves, 20 moves, whatever, they're on move 3 of the game and they realize they just made a stupid move and now they've lost if their opponent has any sort of competence or something like that. That is something that with at least enough computer memory and things like that, we could literally represent every single possible state of the chessboard. That's something we could do programmatically and just apply pure logic to the problem. Predicting, looking at what are all the possible moves I can make next. There is a finite number of legal moves I can make next on the board. And based on that, what's that going to put their position in? So that's something we can do programmatically. Now, we can also train an AI model to play chess. We can say, okay, we're going to go ahead and feed you data from a zillion different chess games played by the best chess players in the world until you start making decisions like the best chess players in the world make, but not just one of them. You're making the best of the best, because you've been trained to a level where when you predict your next move based on the current state of the board, you're making moves that aren't necessarily vetted logically, but it's what the best chess players in the world would have done. And they probably vetted it logically, something like that. So that's a good example where we can solve the problem both ways. But in one of the ways, we would have had to use a whole bunch of, especially if we're trying to do it in real time, a whole bunch of memory. Way back when IBM had this computer called Big Blue that they had compete against the chess grandmaster. And, it would sit there and think for a couple of minutes until it would pop out what the move should be next. It was doing this whole big unraveling the whole game. And, so it was a solvable problem programmatically, but it wasn't an easy problem to solve, right? Whereas not that the chess AI is an easy problem to solve, but it's not really a different problem to solve than training ChatGPT or training your financial model thing. It's like, hey, we're just going to feed you chess stuff. Here's all the greatest chess players in history, and this is all the moves they've ever made under these circumstances. Now you predict what the move should be given the current state of the board. So we might say that we get a very good result. In fact, in many cases, we might get as good of a result or a better result, or at least a faster result passing it through that model. So a lot of times AI models are kind of considered like black boxes, where you have this thing that knows how to solve a problem and you drop your request into it and it shoots out an answer. And even though the way it was trained, this entity, the neural network that's sitting here, this thing was trained on a bunch of logic-based data, presumably from human intelligence and all sorts of stuff. But there aren't like a bunch of if statements and stuff like that in here. Instead, it's purely a guessing game. It just happens to guess in a way that aligns with logic, which starts becoming kind of amazing. So there are problems that would be difficult / borderline impossible, if not sometimes impossible, to solve purely logically. Write a bunch of if statements to make some decision, because it is very difficult. Even when we go back to coding 1 and we think about the idea of why is programming hard for people? It's because human beings are so good at solving problems, we have trouble articulating how we're solving it. So we're effectively ChatGPT, right? We have all these abilities. People can ask us all these questions, and at least based on our experiences and what things we've been exposed to and things like that, we can give you an answer, but we can't necessarily articulate all the little if statements that were going on in our head when we gave you that answer. Like, that's just the answer. We can't articulate how we do it. So when we say AI, what we're really doing is we're creating these facsimiles of, call it us, our brain, that can give you an answer not based on programmatic logic, but based on experience. They've shoved a lifetime of experience into these things by feeding it billions of tokens of information over a 1 or 2 week period with tons of computational resources and things like that, but effectively trained up a little financial baby, right? It's all this little baby, all he's good at is it reminds me of that movie. Was it called Boss Baby? I think there was like 2 or 3 of them actually. Yeah. But in any case, so AI means that. So we come back full circle to how we started this, talking about the idea of a model. So AI is the concept, modern AI is the concept of applying a model that's trained on some kind of data to real world problems and having it either solve those problems more efficiently, um, good enough, whatever it is. I mean, take like the things that are like text to video. I saw a thing the other day. It's actually pretty fascinating. It's a whole YouTube channel for it. But what they do is they take the books from the Bible and put it into an AI model, which does text to video. And it produces like what the book of Revelation would look like if it was a movie. It was really kind of fascinating I mean, I'm sure this guy did a lot of fine tuning of his models and stuff, but because I've used a lot of text to video models, they don't produce that quality. You usually have things with a couple extra arms and some extra fingers, but it was pretty impressive. But that's something you couldn't write a program to do that. Like you wouldn't even know where to start, really. There's just so many little twists and turns. Yeah. Um, well, I mean, it makes sense to me with the voice. I mean, I assume they're using AI to replace voice actors, so voice actors no longer have jobs. Is that the premise? Okay. Well, I mean, that makes sense, but is maybe the voice actors can become, I did this the other day with one of my programs for turning a PDF book into an audiobook. So I didn't have to read it, I can listen to it. All these different text to speech models that are out there, one of the things the model takes is the voice it should produce. And that has to be trained with a real voice. You have a real voice. So these voice actors, rather than them needing to be hired for every single video game and repeat every single line that has to be said in the game, they can instead be hired to have their voice computerized for a model so that this model produces that person's voice. That's my speculation, but the idea is that model is going to be less error prone, right? When I listen to a lot of audiobooks. I probably listen to 2 or 3 books a week. And when you're listening to audiobooks that often, you start seeing even professionally developed audiobooks, which is, I mean, a lot of these books are older to the point where they definitely didn't have AI back then. This was an actual dude speaking into a microphone while he was reading it. He messes up, right? Sometimes you'll have a little voiceover things where they had to go and fix it. Where with the AI models, you wouldn't really have that. You might have weird inflections and stuff like that, but you now can generate a person X who's now trained some model with his voice. You can have him read an entire book by running it through a program for a half hour. And now you got the entire book in audio format. So I think it's maybe just the business of voice actors and things like that that's going to have to change, where people are going to now be selling their voice likeness, if you will, to the AI companies who are going to be training models geared towards game voiceovers or geared towards audiobooks, geared towards AI generated podcasts, things like that. Yeah. So in any case, I mean, so was there more to the AI strike thing?
That they don't want companies to steal their voices, so that we can own the rights without paying any compensation.
Yeah. So and that seems reasonable, because part of the reason a place hires Arnold Schwarzenegger to be a voiceover for a game because they want Arnold's voice. Lots of people do impersonations of Arnold's voice, so you can get kind of the closest of thing. But there's so much audio clips of people out there that you don't even need the real person. You can just take it. Now you got their voice in there. There'll be a lot of intellectual property lawsuits and things like that. Kind of like, I think, playing old songs or reruns of like Everybody Loves Raymond and stuff like that. Who's getting paid? But yeah, I mean, it changes a whole livelihood. Yeah.
Oh, I was just gonna say, like, I could see it being a good thing, because if you sold your voice, you could be heard for hundreds of years after you're dead.
As long as you got paid enough up front. Yeah, because I mean, if you were gonna, let's say your whole career path was voice actor, if you were gonna spend the next 30 years of your life being a voice actor, and all of a sudden you just wake up today and you find out you've been replaced by AI, and you have one opportunity to get your voice digitized in such a way, there'll probably actually end up being some kind of licensing where they can use your voice through AI and anything they want, but they have to pay you either per product, per minute of vocal, whatever. But I mean, you're going to see that in a lot of different venues. But yeah, I mean, this is a not necessarily a bad thing with AI. Well, and I was about to say that, but they are getting more and more authentic. And like I mentioned a minute ago with audiobooks, I hear the people reading these books professionally make more mistakes than the AIs would probably make. Now, maybe that is part of authenticity, right? People misspeaking or having just little, they run two words together just because they did. That's what humans do, right? So when something starts getting too good, now all of a sudden it does seem less authentic. So maybe 10% of the time, you can say, well, this particular thing really needed to have more authenticity, but I feel like it's not unfair to say that 90% of the time it's probably good enough for things. So it's going to create some very interesting things, and that's even just in one little piece of all the problems that exist in the world, right? Because with these AI, if you go to a website, I know we're going off here, but we're going to do it anyways. You probably won't complain if you don't have homework. Let me get to the models here. So for example, this is a site I go to pretty often to look for, I don't know, I guess inspiration. I think I mentioned before, like most nights, like when I would have otherwise sat down to play a video game, I hit here and I go and just kind of look through, look over here at the side. It kind of says, here's the types of problems these models are built to solve. So you have these multimodal models, which are kind of, they're more jack of all trade type things. Then you start getting into things dealing with specifically computer vision, image classification, reading stuff from images. Here's image to text. I use one of the models from here from one of my applications. I use a Google model called Gemma, which can pull text off of pictures of ID cards. I pull phone numbers off of them. But I just kind of go shopping for models here for 5 minutes. And I click on it. I see kind of what's popular right now. You can do it on trending. You can do it on the most downloads, whatever. Let's see, is my Gemma one pop up here anywhere near the top? Well, whatever. I find something on here, and then I can just incorporate it into my application using either downloading it directly and then depending on what language I'm using to write whatever project. It's like a fun thing to do. Well, what we're looking at here, this is what AI is. AI is a bunch of solutions to problems that we either have or haven't thought of. These are almost like little joints. Okay, so we might say, hey, I can write an entire book here, but I want somebody to read it to me. Well, I can go hire the voice actor in the middle to do that, and that's going to cost me a lot of money, and we don't want to do that. So I'm going to write the thing, pass it through this program that converts text to voice, and then I have an audio file that I can go and listen to. So the problem that the AI model is solving is feed it a bunch of text, I'll give you the audio equivalent. And the way models are compared to each other is how good are they at doing that? Not just in terms of the output, but also in terms of the variety of voices you have and things like that. Um, so when we talk about AI, and so for example, we just incorporated we put in the paperwork for a new major in computer science here. That's going to be called Applied Artificial Intelligence, which is focused more on the uses of AI, kind of AI mixed with philosophy. Now, to go out and be able to use these things in industry. So we're going to be software engineers, several of you, and you're going to go into industry. Do you think that when you go out and get your job in 1, 2, 3 years, whenever it is, that you're probably going to be having to work with models like this as part of almost any job out there today? We're looking at we're looking at the future of problem solving. Not that this replaces coding, but this gives you another little fork in the road when you're writing software to solve a problem. You can say, well, do I want to come up with an algorithm that solves this particular problem? Or is that so difficult to conceptualize and potentially impossible that if there's an AI model, a black box that I can just feed my input into, and it gives me the result that I wanted on the other side, regardless of how it pulled it off? That's a new problem solving thing. It's going to open up a lot of doors for solutions, going to self-driving cars, things that have existed in some form, but not really a safe form. So I had a Tesla and I had the full self-driving beta on the thing. And I mean, it was cool. And I trust technology quite a bit, but you wouldn't want to be driving on the road with that thing. I mean, it was making all sorts of weird turns and things like that. You get it in a parking lot, it wouldn't hit anything, but it would pretend to, like often. But you're going to see some really cool solutions to problems. So as um, modern software engineers, this is part of what we're going to have to be incorporating into our problem solving. When does it make sense to spend a day or two or a week writing this big algorithm to solve some structured problem, as opposed to using an existing model that really probably will solve the problem even better than we ever could have by articulating an algorithm? It's not replacing programmers. This is replacing a function. Instead of writing a function that does X, I'll just use a model that's already been trained by someone else to do X. Well, so then we get to the idea of AI, the difference between training and inference. Okay, so this is where it starts getting interesting, and where we have a partnership with Waukesha Community Technical College. They have an AI lab there, and we're also working with a incubator place called Generator down in Milwaukee. So when we were over at the thing I had to go to on Wednesday, um, I had to go sign some documents and stuff, and they gave us the tour. They have a computer in there that is AMD's um, uh, latest AI machine. It's like a 30, 40, $50,000 computer that's just sitting there. They sit in a room, and they're saying, "Oh, this is serial number one," which it is. This chip just came out, and but when you look in the room, it's just like it's a boring looking gaming machine sitting on the desk, because it doesn't have all the lights and stuff. Like, it's just a box. Yet that was whatever the final price tag. Let's just call it 50 grand to make it sound extra expensive. It probably was a little south of that, but ballparky. What do you need that for? What does a tool like that do for us? Besides bragging rights, obviously. But
I'd argue it's like a multi-tool, like that pocket knife that has the screwdriver.
okay, well, so what's one thing you'd use that computer for? This is kind of my point of today's discussion, is even technologists. I think most of us in this room would say that we are, at various levels potentially, but we're geeks, right? We like tech. We like learning about, we're advocates for technology. Well, so now you have this awesome computer sitting there on the desk, but what does it mean to be an awesome computer? Okay, I like your use of like a kind of a Swiss Army knife of computers, but what's one of the functions of a computer like that? So you go out, you slap down $50,000. They bring over the boring looking computer that They couldn't even make it look huge. They could have just put a bunch of fans in it to at least seem impressive. Okay. I mean, this thing you could have carried out under your arm, no problem. They only had it behind a swipe. Um, but what kind of thing would you use that computer for? What?
Cool Discord profile picture.
Okay. Okay. So let's go down that path. So using an AI model that had somebody's a text to image. So let's see that's over here in one of these, right? Here, text to image. So we can grab any one of these. Let's see what's the most downloaded. Let's do most likes. Black Forest. All right, so we can, we see there's a bunch of them, right? There's 100 pages of those things. Whole bunch of models that fall into the category of text to image. So you can go and experiment, find one of those models and use it to generate your cool Discord pictures. You describe what you want, right? And then it can generate the image for you. Well, all these models we're looking at here are pre-trained models. Somebody else has already spent the 3 weeks, 4 weeks, 10 weeks of time, depending on the size of the model, where it's used all these computing resources and all this memory and all this stuff. It's because what it started off with is this neural network, this model that was empty, barely could do anything. And then it just started training it. Okay. And you can think of training as kind of like if you've seen the movie The Matrix, when she needed to learn how to fly the helicopter and they loaded the disc, right? And her eyes blinked a little bit and now she's like, or he said, I know Kung Fu or earlier in the movie, that kind of stuff. So effectively it trains this model to now know how to take text and turn it into images. So now once this model is trained, do you really need a $50,000 computer to run that model? Maybe, depends on the model. So something like ChatGPT, as we imagine, it's good at doing a lot of different things, right? It might not be great at any of those things, although I would say it's pretty great at writing. And there's some models that you can use that make it use real stuff more commonly than just things it's read. Because as we know, you can go on to social media all over the place and get misinformation left and right. Okay. You can get misinformation from scientific papers as well. Maybe it wasn't misinformation at the time, but part of the idea of research is somebody comes up and sometimes they disprove a previous person's stuff. Okay? But they have access to the amount to information that far beyond what any individual human being could have. So that's where it's going to change kind of the idea of research. But regardless, ChatGPT is a humongous model. Training it takes ridiculous amounts of horsepower. Running it doesn't take that same level of horsepower, but takes a lot of horsepower to run that model, especially when it's hosted in the cloud and has a zillion people all trying to use it at once. So now it's the Google search engine problem. It's like, yeah, Google probably is a pretty hefty web server they're running over there, but it's not just one computer. They have them in regions and stuff of that because there's a zillion people per second that are trying to do Google searches. So this machine that was at WCTC was really something that would probably most appropriate for training a model for making your cool Discord images. Maybe you decide, okay, well, it's not just a generalistic text to image model. Maybe you start with that. Maybe you start with one of these models and you say, you know what, this is the model that gives me the most, I'm just going to pick an example, maybe the most anime type of output, cartoony, whatever, instead of being too realistic. So maybe you say, okay, this model's already doing some stuff that's, it's close, but it's not quite where I want it. So you can start with that model, and then you can say, well, now what I want to do is I want to further train this model. I want to build on top of this. A lot of times in AI, they call it fine tuning. We're going to fine tune this model, although depending on the level you're going to upgrade, it might be more than fine tuning. It could be tuning, I guess. But you're gonna do something to this model to make it better than it was on its own, and now it's become your model, right? Kind of like adopting a kid. So you adopted a kid, and now you've trained them to do the stuff that you think they should be able to be good at doing. So now they're still the kid you originally got. Okay, you can't return them now. You're past the you're past that, but you've trained it on new things. So a powerful computer like that, which is one of probably 1,000 similar computers that OpenAI uses merged together to train humongous models. But that one computer could probably take a decent stab at training a model for our Discord profile picture thing. But to run that model, you don't need that computer. To run that model, you probably need a mid-tier laptop. Frankly, so when you run a model, it's called inference. When you train a model, it's called training. Training requires significantly more computation power than inferencing does. Inferencing's computation power is relative to kind of the size of your model in terms of the amount of stuff it has to store in memory at once. So frankly, it's really a memory dependent issue, not so much a compute power issue. So if you have the fastest CPU in the world, but you only have 8 GB of RAM, you probably are going to be fairly limited on the number of models you'll be able to use, even from inference. Like I've mentioned in here, I've run into several situations where I've run out of RAM on my machine, and this machine has 128 gigs of RAM in it. Get over your skis and say, okay, well, I'm trying to, like the other day, I was messing with after I saw that Revelation to the Book of Revelation to video thing. I'm like, oh, I'm gonna try and make my own one of those. Don't feed it the entire Book of Revelation at once. I ran out of memory super fast. I was only about 2 minutes into it before that mouse stopped working, and I couldn't even. I had to kill it. I just hold the power button until it shut down. But you start recognizing, we've kind of come full circle with our hardware today, where for a long time, I think I mentioned this a couple classes ago, for a long time, we've felt like our computing speeds have been well ahead of the kinds of problems we're solving with them for normal people. Not that we don't still need these distributed servers for services like web browsing or search engines, Google, things like that, but generally speaking, all our computers are fast. It doesn't matter whether you get a MacBook Air or you get the most expensive MacBook Pro, checking your email is going to feel the same, right? The way we're using those computers is going to feel the same. Well, now we have this new world of stuff that's going to change our landscape. Every one of your jobs when you go out into industry is going to involve AI. That doesn't mean AI is replacing everybody's jobs. I like to think of human beings as kind of like the joints when we're dealing with solving problems. So, when we're writing our video game here, and there's aspects of our game where the human being's we're gonna write this function, write normal code stuff. Then we have some part of the game where it's like, you know what? I want there to be maybe kind of a human-esque type of back and forth chat or something like that. So you might find a relatively small chat bot, not ChatGPT. They're not going to be asking, you're probably not going to be asking dissertation type questions in the game, but you want to have somewhat of a natural back and forth where you can ask an NPC in the game anything you wanted. And it could have somewhat of a decent conversation with you. So you just decide, well, as the programmer, I'm not going to hard code in the 30 possible responses this guy knows how to do. Instead, I'm going to embed a model for that. And anything that the user types in, I'm going to send it through the model, and we'll just have them spit back. We'll wrap it in a prompt saying, given this question, give the answer as a military lieutenant, blah, 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 however, whatever the personality of your NPC should have, and it's going to do a better job than we could have ever done programming it, right? But now, as the human being, as the programmer, we've chosen to use that. We've tweaked it. We've messed with the prompt that we feed into that in such a way to get a result that we feel like, yeah, this feels natural for my game. That's not always a fix. You know, sometimes you're going to say, well, and I think that's going to be the danger we run into over the next couple of years is this stuff is all very new. You're going to have people become too reliant on the AI models. I mean, I use them all the time, but you have to kind of know when is it the right tool for the job versus when am I saving 15 minutes to cost myself 4 hours later on because of something it did. That messed up the thought process or whatever it is. You know, it's kind of just finding the right tool for the job. And we're still getting used to these tools in terms of what they can do, which is amazing. They can do really amazing things. But then they do some things that are just not so great at doing, yet as technologists, we can get lulled into thinking they can do everything. Um, but it's kind of a fun time, I would say, I mean, really, it's an exciting time, I think, to be a computer science student, which is kind of a good thing in the bigger context of jobs. You know, the job market isn't great right now. You know, the way that higher ed is being viewed by industry isn't great right now. You know, I think a lot of schools, not even just higher ed, you go junior high, high school, you know, the bars have lowered over time, and you can sit there and have all sorts of different rationales for why this is. But you know, we're in a tough situation. But the whole world's in a tough situation with all sorts of different things here. But now we have this new cool thing that isn't really well understood, which is, I think, where we have an interesting opportunity in education to say, well, if we can really wrap our mind around what we're really dealing with here, you know, we're not dealing with people's jobs being taken away by AI. We're probably dealing with people's productivity being expected to be higher because now they have this tool that'll allow them to do a lot of the grunt work. You know, that's where I probably see AI being the best use of, you know, like, you know, you can, something that maybe would have taken me a 20 minutes to do, I can do now in 45 seconds. Maybe summarizing a giant document that I don't have to read through right now because I'm interested in just a couple of different pieces of information. And I could say, look through this 50-page PDF and pull out and summarize the aspects of this thing I'm interested in. That way I can focus in on just that. It's good at doing those things. That's time saving. Well, if I'm being paid per hour, now that's stuff that I can, you know, that's hours that my boss is now going to want me to spend on other things because I can produce stuff too quickly. So it might also be a good thing to hide behind. You don't want to be too good at your job. So you get your answer and then you play video games for 6 hours. Then you submit. It still took a while until they catch on that it can do all this stuff. But it's an exciting time, I think, for to be a computer science student because the world that has the technology world that's kind of lost the trust of industry is kind of going away. And what we've been seeing over the last couple of years is industry is choosing to pick people already in industry with years of experience over fresh college grads. Well, the issue is that nobody has years of experience using AI models. It's brand new. And industry, because in industry, typically the decision makers are not necessarily technical people. So people who are currently there aren't necessarily getting a lot of experience with these AI models because they're not be giving directives from a business-minded person who doesn't understand what this AI is. And what kind of got me onto this whole conversation is when I was at this this meeting on Wednesday, there were people giving talks who were supposed to be the experts in AI that had no clue what AI was. And I don't think it was vindictive. I think that they didn't know what they didn't know. That's good for you. As technology students, you can now become experts in this stuff, figure out when can I incorporate it into my problem solving, into my software and things like that, to be able to solve more complex problems better and faster. And now you come out as somebody who can have all over their resume that, you know, I you know, have worked with AI for this. As long as you have the AI buzzwords, they're going to hire you. right? So we're going to have kind of a rebirth of, I think, software development jobs coming about as a result of this, after we get our, inflation and whatever under control. But that's all cyclic stuff. I'm not that old, but I'm a lot older than all of you. And I remember multiple times inflation was this bad over the years. Things just always seem horrible when we're in the middle of them. But I think it's going to turn into us having a lot of job opportunities for students coming out. So now is the time to become an expert in this stuff because this is what you're going to be hired for. And some of the stuff is just frivolous, things like people wasting their time wanting to generate a cool profile image. I do the same crap. I can't even, I think I've told some of you, well, you see his picture on here. Isn't Mr. Gonzalez on here? Yeah, this guy. That's Mr. Gonzalez. That's an elf on the shelf that travels the world with my wife and I. He's an actual doll. There's a whole backstory. He's married. All this stuff is really something I should, they should have me as a case study in the psychology department or something. But I can't tell you how many hours I've taken pictures of him from different things and trying to create animations with AI models of him doing crazy stuff. Things that I've only talked about him doing in the past, but now I can make it real. He has his own fish tank. He has a 125-gallon fish tank with carnivores in it and stuff. Yeah, the guy's crazy. It's unhinged. But in any case, that's obviously a better use of time than your Discord images, making my doll dance and stuff. So obviously we didn't get much accomplished coding wise today, but hopefully this reinvigorates you a little bit with your chosen major, and that maybe there is a decent outcome for higher ed, and you're actually interestingly positioned right now where most of you are a couple of years from graduation, 3 years from graduation. I think that might be the sweet spot for where if you come out an expert and you get involved with an internship with this stuff, maybe get involved with some startup things. We're going to be getting some of the startup community folks from Milwaukee called Generator. We're going to have them here on campus as well. Getting involved in some things with them, just working on little hackathon projects with AI. Get good at this stuff. I think you're going to be rewarded later, even though things haven't looked great for the last couple of years. All right, questions about any of that? All right, so we'll come back on Monday. We'll actually finish our HP thing. We want to start thinking about where do we go next from that. If just in our last minute here, kind of where I'm thinking is, right now we're having our fight be very automated. I'm thinking maybe the next step might be we have some the ability during the fight. If you go back to the original Final Fantasy, you got to choose, what am I going to do in my turn? It's a turn-based thing. Am I gonna take a health potion and heal myself? Am I gonna cast a spell that maybe does more damage, but has a lower chance of hitting, whatever it is? So maybe we'll add, 3 things in. We'll have a normal hit, which is kind of what we're doing now. We'll have like a super swing that has a lower chance of connecting, but if you connect, it hits for like 30% more damage. And maybe you have a health potion where you can drink it to get some of your hit points back. You won't do any damage to them that turn, but you hopefully will live to fight another turn, something like that. So we'll be able to incorporate ourselves into the gameplay. Sound good? All right. I will see everybody on Monday. Maybe go check out this website, huggingface.co, and see if anything catches your eye on there. And I think you'll find that it's pretty easy to start messing with the stuff. Take care. Well, it didn't exist 3 years ago. Well, well, it's not too late. You can dive into it yourself. You're going to learn way more on your own than you'll ever learn in the class.